Now, let's get to the meat of this particular interview and talk about your new releases.
Yeah, so we're on the cusp of releasing our 2018 single vineyard Pinots, and it's really exciting. You know, we're a terroir-driven project. What excited me about this area was the specific profile of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay that you get, and that is possible in a cool climate, limestone-driven area, and so, you know, being a, you know, it's not a stretch to see that I'm a Burgundy fan, right? Having worked with, you know, with Burgundy for many years, and in my previous job, and as a wine lover, I mean, that's just been the pinnacle for me. And of course, the notion of terroir with regards to Pinot and Chardonnay is very important. You have the notion that you can have two vineyards side by side that yield very different expressions year after year with the same defining characteristics. That has always intrigued me. It's why I, you know, as a younger man, I used to study the map of Burgundy and try and remember the differences of, you know, the various vineyards in Beaune or Gevrey-Chambertin.
Yep.
But you know, what I hadn't discovered yet, or you know, many years ago, is how those same vineyards differences can manifest themselves in Ontario, and I started seeing that with some of my colleagues who got to the party earlier than me, and gave me the confidence that you could make terroir-driven, interesting Pinot and Chardonnay in Ontario. And what we've discovered is that well, we've been able to get access to some tremendous vineyards, all within a very short distance of the winery. I'm talking about, you know, in under a kilometer. We've got 4 different 20-mile bench Pinot Noirs, the single vineyards.
And those all come under the Wismer family umbrella, don't they?
Mostly. There's one of the vineyards is not owned by them, but is farmed by them.
Yes,
so. Yeah, so they're responsible for the viticulture on all the vineyards. They're, you know, it's a really interesting, you know, our when I say we're a terroir-driven project, our top wines are the single vineyard wines. They're $50 a bottle. We make small amounts. We pick the best of the best from that vineyard in that particular vintage, and then we have our 20-mile bench wines, which are a blend of those.
Yes.
So the idea behind putting those at the top are, you know, rather than having a reserve wine, is that, you know, you taste these wines, they all come from a very short distance away from each other, and they're all incredibly distinct from each other. Now, you get a lot of conversation about which one's better, which one's, but I tend to have, like, when I pour them side by side, a couple wines, it'll be 50-50 what people like better. It's not what's better necessarily, it's that they're different. And that to me has always been and continues to be fascinating.
Now,
I've got them here. I can hold them up.
That sounds good. That sounds good.
Yeah, so the first of the 4 is Glenelgin Vineyard.
Now, where is it positioned exactly?
It's about 800 yards southeast of the winery, just on the next level of the escarpment. It's a really interesting vineyard. We've actually been working with it since 2015. It tends to be it has shallower soil and is really close to the trees. The soils have a little less clay than some of the vineyards, and it tends to yield a wine with really nice red fruit, an underlying minerality, and generally a really sort of pure element to it. It's actually in 2018, it's a little wilder, which is great. I don't know whether that was, you know, all the stuff we do is spontaneous fermentation. We don't add commercial yeast. So, you know, with wild ferments, if you will, they're, you know, you see some different characteristics brought out in certain times, but it's still very much Glenelgin. And having vinified that 6 times now, we can see those characteristics coming through there, even though I think this year, as opposed to the year before, it's maybe slightly slightly wilder side coming through, but the same underlying terroir characteristics are certainly there.
Now, do you put that wilder side down to vintage, vine age, or something else entirely?
Well, it is. They are old vines, certainly by Niagara standards, planted in 1996. I don't know exactly. This is the thing that part of this. When you speak with someone who's been whose family's been making wine in a certain vineyard for decades or generations, they're able to speak with more confidence about what the terroir is. I have certain experiences. For example, when I compare the Homestead Vineyard and the Glenelgin Vineyard, which we've vinified side by side since 2015, I can definitely see what's terroir, what's vintage, what's clone, all these things. But with these vineyards that I'm seeing, we're just developing that knowledge because we haven't been at it long enough. But I have my suspicions, and I mean the downside is that I can't have this conversation with more authority. The upside is we've got these amazing wines that are distinct from each other, yes. and I suspect most of those differences are terroir rather than fermentation, or if you know what I mean. So,
now you mentioned clonal selection there. What do you have in the Glenelgin?
Yeah. Glenelgin is entirely 115.
Right.
Whereas Homestead, that's only 200 yards away, is a mixture of 115 and 777. But we vinified those blocks separately so we can see what's clonal difference and what's terroir.
So may we see the bottle for the Homestead?
Well, the Homestead actually, funny enough, we don't. I can show you a bottle I have here of our 2007 Homestead, but we didn't bottle a single. We didn't bottle a single vineyard Homestead in 18 because we don't do anything by recipe. We sit here with every barrel and we taste them, and if we can't come up with a blend that we think is either distinct enough to warrant a single vineyard, or in this case where we thought it just wasn't quite up to the other ones, I don't want to put it up there, and I've got to be the one looking at someone in the eye and charging $50 for the bottle. So I got to make sure that even at that level, we're offering good value. So
would that have been declassified into the 20 Mile Bench Pinot then?
Absolutely, right. Absolutely, and it helped a lot because there were tremendous wines. But sometimes, when you're making blends, you might have certain barrels that taste great, but when you're putting them together, they don't sing.
Yes.
It's hard to describe even, but when we do our tasting, and there's 3 or 4 of us at the table at any given time when we're doing that, and it's got to convince me. I always said from the beginning, I used to joke that I've got to love every wine we put out, or every wine we make, because if it doesn't sell, I'm going to be the one drinking it.
Yeah.
We've known each other for a very long time, and I've always been in this game because I'm a wine lover, and I've had the good fortune to work with big brands and small brands in my previous life, but what's always attracted me is the sort of the greatness of wine, and when something moves you emotionally and intellectually, then it's that to me is what it's all about, and that's what I look for in these wines. They've got to be great to me before I can try and convince anyone else of their greatness.
Although you didn't release a 2018 Homestead, tell me a little bit about the Homestead Vineyard and how the soils are, how that drinks as a single vineyard wine, and what you believe it brings to the blend.
Well, so as opposed to Glenelgin, which is thinner soil, less clay, and a little closer to the trees, Homestead set back a little bit, deeper soil with a higher clay content, a loamier soil, and so and it tends to be a little broader in the palate and a little earthier, whereas there's a purity with the fruit in Glenelgin, so they're quite different. And again, it's like people have always thought, sort of there's a 50-50 split of who liked one more than the other. And then, it's interesting, there's a little segue there. Both beneath Glenelgin, down, which is a vineyard that's about 700 yards to the east here, is it's called Cuesta. And it's interesting, there's some similarities in the soil in that there's some of that sort of limestone and gravelly character of Glenelgin exists below, and whether or not it was a glacial pushover or whether it was erosion, I'm not certain. But there's also a deeper soil in Cuesta with a little more clay than Glenelgin, and so we have it tends to be a wine that's and again, we're still learning, but now we've worked with it for 3 years in a row, and I can see that it tends to be a little bolder than Glenelgin, a little bit. We have some of those same sort of same great minerality coming through, but there's maybe a little more breadth to it, and it can be a little earthier as well. Then we come across to the Hank Vineyard, which is located a few hundred yards to the northeast of here. So just, I can see it if I were to walk over to the vineyard window here. It is the first vineyard above King Street, if you will. It's like the first vineyard on the slope as far as King Street being the northern boundary of 20 Mile Bench.
Yeah.
So this is down on the slope, and it is the most fantastic combination of power and elegance, as far as vineyard here. And so it really, there's a real sort of fineness to it. And I'm always tempted to draw analogies with all these wines to my favorite Burgundian.
Oh, I'm sure you are.
Yeah. At this time. But I think, when you have that wonderful, whereas in Burgundy, you may have some vineyards that are very elegant and some that are very powerful, and then you get those ones that combine both. Yeah. And Hank is one of those vineyards. And with Hank, it's there's a reddish clay element there, but it's the clay limestone mix like the entire area. But what's really interesting is that each vineyard has a slightly different mix, and a slightly, some have a little more gravel, some have a little bit more of that silt and sand, and so the subtle differences really do matter. And of course, being, as you go north to south here, you're talking about different elevations, even if it's only 5 or 10 feet. That can make a difference as the air flows down the vineyard. So Hank is immediately to the north of the last vineyard here called Park, and Park has, to me, a little more power, a little more foursquare when it's young, but a tremendous quality and a great density. Now here again, I'm trying to determine what is, there are some clonal differences, and there's some vine age difference between the vineyards as well. So over time, we'll start to figure out what's what there. But all I can tell you is that right now, having worked with these wines for 3 years in a row, I can now see what those characteristics that come back every year. And we can taste, and we do it blind, and we go, oh yeah, that's Hank, or that's Park, or that's Glenelgin. And these same things come through. Now, there is, as I said, Hank is 114 and 777 clone. It was planted in 2007, and Park was planted in 1999 with 667 and right. 115. So it's, there's some slight differences, but the vineyards, I tell you, Jamie, they're separated by, a headland for tractors to get to. Yeah. I mean, they're that close to each other, but the wines are distinct. And when I taste through, I had the opportunity to taste through samples from Thomas Batchelder, who makes wine from the same 2 vineyards. And we saw the same characteristics coming in his wine. He made from a different cellar by a different winemaker. So.
Now, perhaps I missed this, but did you mention the clonal breakdown in the Cuesta vineyard?
I probably didn't, but it is 777.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So those are those four clones are tend to dominate. Well, certainly the vineyards that we work with here I mean, you'll see some 828 around as well, but 115, 114, 667, and 777 tend to be the most dominant clones in the area, and they've found a great deal of success here.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, I look forward to tasting these when I get a chance. Hopefully, I'll get an opportunity to come down and see you at some point soon.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's like a year and a half since I've been in Niagara. Good Lord.
I know, it's crazy, and you know, all those great events that we're coming up in a couple of weeks to I4C, which again, unfortunately, will be virtual, but it'll still be a great event. And we're really, you know, we're in that funny time where we've skipped some cycles together where we normally see,
well,
you know,
I4C is one of those events that we always hang about for a good half or a full bottle of wine together for. So it's I'll miss that for sure.
And we will again. But in the meantime, when you're down, we'll do a tasting of these 4 wines side by side, and I'll get you a walk through the little terroir wonderland that is 20 Mile Bench.
Superb. Adam, thank you very much for joining us at Good Food Revolution today. Really good to see you, and I look forward to actually catching up in real life.
A pleasure. Take care.
Take care.